When Dmitri first stepped into the cozy little house on the outskirts of the Moscow region town where his fiancée's family lived, he had no idea that a simple meeting with her mother would ignite a flame that would burn his entire measured life to the ground. The evening air was filled with the aroma of fresh pelmeni. The park glowed over the old cast-iron stove in the kitchen, where dough sizzled in boiling water, and from the living room came the sound of muffled voices and occasional laughter. A typical family evening in such a quiet place, where time flows slowly, like a river outside the window, reflecting the lights of distant houses. At the battered wooden table, covered with a faded polka-dot tablecloth, his gaze involuntarily caught the woman's eyes. Deep and warm, reminiscent of an autumn sunset over fields painted in golden hues, with a slight sadness hidden behind a smile. Natalia, the mother of his future wife, looked much younger than her 47 years. Years of care hadn't broken her, but rather added charm, like sweat on old silver. Her simple movements, as she poured tea from a battered teapot, thick clouds of it, or adjusted her flower-stained apron, radiated that same rustic grace born of years spent tending to the house and garden, weeding the beds at dawn, washing clothes in cold water by the river. Her voice was soft, like the rustle of leaves on wet earth after rain, with a slight rasp from long conversations by the stove. It made something inside Dmitri tremble, making his heart beat a little faster than usual, like the echo of distant thunder. He nodded diligently, absorbing the conversation about the upcoming fence repairs at the dacha. The old boards were rotted from moisture, and about plans for a modest wedding at a local club, with strings of lights and homemade salads. Nothing special, just a family affair that binds people together more tightly than rope. But every time their gazes accidentally crossed, for a moment, after a couple of cups, a strange warmth would flare in his chest, elusive, like smoke from a campfire in the evening garden, leaving behind a slight
anxiety and confusion, as if sensing a storm brewing somewhere over the horizon.
At first, Dmitri dismissed these feelings. Nonsense, just nerves before meeting his family, the excitement of stepping into a new life. This was his future mother-in-law, a woman he would share only by family ties, helping him with heavy bags around the house, celebrating with toasts and pies, nothing more that might be out of character. Such a thing shouldn't even cross his mind, especially in their quiet town, where everyone knows everyone else by name and gossip spreads faster than the wind through the narrow streets from house to house. But with each new visit to this house, with its cracked plaster walls, where frost cracks showed, the creaking floorboards underfoot, betraying every step, and the view of the neglected garden outside the window, where the apple trees swayed in the gusts of wind, dropping their first leaves, the attraction grew, like an invisible thread tightening slowly but surely, preventing one from breathing freely, enveloping one's soul. He particularly vividly remembers one quiet evening toward the end of summer, when the air still held the warmth of the day, permeated with the scent of ripe raspberries, and the sun was setting, painting the sky pink, reflected in puddles from a recent rain. Maria, his fiancée, had gone to Moscow to visit a friend for the day, something about shopping in noisy stores and chatting over coffee in cafes, and Dmitri, offering to help out of politeness, stayed behind to carry heavy sacks of potatoes from the cool cellar under the house, which smelled of damp earth, mold, and roots. They sat in the kitchen at a table set with jars of deer meat, and the conversation flowed naturally, like a stream. Natalia told a funny story about neighbors arguing over a sagging fence, waving rakes like swords in an old fairy tale, and they both laughed, heartily, echoing in the empty house, where usually only the ticking of the clock was heard. But suddenly the laughter died down, and a silence hung in the air, thick and electrifying, like before a storm, full of words that were never spoken, but hung around like an invisible fog, heavy with the unspoken. Natalia looked away, staring out the window at the shadows of the wicked wicks lengthening on the ground, crawling across the grass, but her cheeks flushed slightly. A slight blush, like a girl caught in an awkward moment at a village dance, betrayed her inner turmoil. At that very moment, Dmitri realized this wasn't just his fantasy. It was mutual, like an echo in an empty forest, returning, intensifying with each reflection. This secret began to burn and beckon at the same time, tearing him apart
like a knife through the living.
On the one hand, there was his duty to Maria, to the family he was about to create, with her plans for a life together and quiet happiness in this town. Children running around the yard, a dacha with garden beds, the stability so prized in their circle. On the other, there was this new, inexplicable feeling, rooted deeper than the old oak tree in the yard, branched and unbroken by years of spring storms. He began to catch himself in small details. Now he looked forward to precisely those visits where he could hear her quiet, slightly hoarse laughter.